Fade in, interior child's bedroom. The walls are painted yellow. A rocking horse, a tricycle, dolls, action figures, children's books, and other assorted items and objects reflecting childhood. There is no door. A childlike drawing of a window done in charcoal appears on one of the walls. We see a pregnant woman in a blue raincoat and a man in a red jacket, similar to the one James Dean wore in Rebel Without a Cause. White t-shirt, blue jeans. Let's call the man James and the woman Marilyn. James has a drinking glass pressed against the wall, his ear pressed to the glass. Marilyn, what are you doing? James, listening for God. Marilyn, do you hear him? James, no. Marilyn, do you hear anything? James, no. James moves his glass to other spots on the wall and listens. Marilyn, anything? James, nope. Marilyn, can I listen? James hands the glass to Marilyn. Marilyn presses the glass to the wall, ear to the glass. James, well? Marilyn, hold on. Marilyn hands James the glass. She crosses to the other side of the room and returns with a wooden chair. Takes off her raincoat, revealing an elegant 1940s style cocktail dress. Drapes her raincoat on the back of the chair, then takes off the heels she's wearing. James stares down at her bare, stockinged feet and notices that there is a hole in one of the toes of her stockings. Through the hole, James spies a Care Bear's Band-Aid wrapped around a toe. Marilyn holds out her heels for James to take, receiving the glass in the exchange. Using James's head for leverage, Marilyn climbs onto the chair and presses the glass against the wall. She moves it to several different positions, like a doctor searching for a heartbeat through a stethoscope. James, anything? Marilyn, nothing, just the silence of the wall. James, wow, the silence of the wall, I like that. Marilyn climbs down from the chair, assisted by James. James and Marilyn swap the heels in the glass. Marilyn looks around the room. James goes back to wall listening. Marilyn, does this room, is it in any way familiar to you? James, nope. Marilyn, from your childhood? James, nope, I thought it might be from your childhood. Marilyn, it isn't. My bedroom walls were painted pink, and I didn't have any of this stuff. Marilyn picks up a Cabbage Patch Kid from the bed. Marilyn, except I did have a Cabbage Patch Kid, just like this one. Marilyn turns the Cabbage Patch Kid around, inspects its butt. Marilyn, Xavier, you always knew it was a real Cabbage Patch Kid and not a knockoff if the name Xavier was on the butt. James, is that true? Marilyn, that's what they told us. Marilyn puts the Cabbage Patch Kid back on the bed. Marilyn, why do you think you'll hear God through the wall? James, I don't know. It's just something that came to me. But now that you mention it, James gets a chair and climbs onto the bed with it, setting the chair on the bed. Marilyn, you're not going to stand on that, are you? James, yep. Marilyn, people on top of chairs on top of beds, not the best idea. James, I'll be careful. James stands on the chair, which is a bit unsteady. He stabilizes balance, then presses the glass against the ceiling, ear to the glass. Marilyn, anything? James, the silence of ceiling. Suddenly, the chair collapses and James crashes onto the bed. Marilyn rushes over. Marilyn, you okay? James, yeah, I'm fine. People on top of chairs on top of beds, not a good idea. Marilyn, I feel like the Laurel and Hardy theme should be playing right now. James whistles the theme, Dance of the Cuckoos.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Edmonds, and I'm the editor-in-chief of For Page and Screen magazine. I'm here today with John Biscello, author of Ballad of the Cuckoos, which we had the pleasure of publishing in our eighth issue. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk about this. I'm also just excited in general because you are one of only two people from our eighth issue who actually wanted to do the interview series with us. So I'm
Oh.
like, I'm like, I actually get to talk about this issue. I enjoy this issue so
Ah,
much. So I'm happy to talk with you. Um,
cool.
I want to start off with a very hopefully easy question, maybe an obvious question. But what inspired the screenplay for you?
Okay, so it's definitely the two guiding forces or ideas or concepts that were behind it mostly. The Twilight Zone. I grew up watching The Twilight Zone, was a huge fan, and I've seen every episode multiple times. And that's always stayed with me, just sort of a lot of those themes and ideas having to do with loneliness or things that are a bit topsy-turvy or go strange or sort of not happening in the way that you expected. It's something that when I was young, I've always carried with me. And Laurel and Hardy, I'm a big fan of like a lot of old films and silent films. And this combination of, I don't know, coming out of the tradition or spirit of old vaudeville, slapstick, and older comedy from, early 20th century, and then this speculative and spooky sort of backdrop or background from the Twilight Zone, wound up being this marriage of ideas that sort of went together, where there's a very surreal and absurdist quality that at times is. I'm also a fan of situations that don't necessarily resolve themselves and do not leave you with any easy answers, ready-made answers, or even answers at the end, but sort of linger and allow you to question and speculate, what's going on, or what's going on now that the film or the story is ended, but that sense of that it's continuing without you. That's something that has always interested me. So those were definitely two ideas. Yeah, just this surrealist comedy blended with something creepy, macabre, and it's funny. One other thing I would throw in is, I had written this prior to our pandemic period. And then when that happened and people actually were um, trapped in their homes or not able to socialize or be out and about in the same way. And, this was something obviously of two people that are wake up trapped in a room, children's room, and they don't know who they are or how they got there. And yeah, again, starting from those situations where it's like, okay, what's happening here? And then just following it. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it.
Mhm. That's really interesting, the timeline of that, because this does feel like a script that is very grounded in kind of like a post-COVID world, for lack of a better way of saying it. Um, but the fact that you wrote it beforehand is really interesting. It's a little eerie, if I'm being
Yeah.
completely honest.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, right, with art, a friend of mine used to say that artists have their feelers or antennas up. So sometimes maybe you're picking up on things in a way that's prescient, or there's an energy that might be in the air, and it can kind of be a little in advance, or you don't always know where you're picking that up from, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I can absolutely see the other inspirations that you were talking about in the script, the Laurel and Hardy. I mean, we get the Laurel and Hardy reference in the screenplay itself, but also that Twilight Zone vibe. Because even the portion you were reading before this conversation, lines and I'm like, I'm laughing along as you're reading because the lines are funny, but also it's really, really disconcerting, this idea of just being trapped and losing the sense of time and memory, and everything just kind of stretches out in this really eerie way. Um, so I think those inspirations came through really, really well in a really unique way here. There's no
Thank you.
question there. That's just me complimenting the piece.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a
Um,
piece, it has, I guess, something that you wouldn't know, but it's been interesting because it's had different, or it's gone through now some different iterations. That it started as a shorter or different screenplay, which I then expanded because I was going to shoot the film here. In fact, before COVID, we were derailed from shooting the film. We were on the cusp of about to film it, and the pandemic period set in. And so that kind of derailed it, and it never picked up steam again as in regards to us filming it. So that's been on the back burner. But then I created a stage play version which differs from this. And there's actually three sets or three different pairs of James and Marilyn's that are all interacting. And so it went in a different direction. And so that's one that I'm hoping to stage, maybe locally where I live. But it's fun because it does feel like one I can drop back into, and I just don't know. It could continue to expand and move in different directions potentially.
Mhm. That's really interesting. I can absolutely see this being kind of like a stage play format, just with how um I don't want to say contained it is, but kind of how contained it is.
Hmm.
It lends itself really well, I think, to that kind of staging. I would love to eventually see it if you ever do stage it. We are in different geographical locations, but I would make a trip. Um, but
You're always welcome. Yeah. The most
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, but I would love to hear what some of the potential challenges have been or were with changing the form with those expansions and shifts from like shorter script to potential stage play. What were some kind of challenges you came across with that?
Um, I guess when I started toying with the idea of doing it as a play, I could have kept it just the two characters. But because I knew it was going to be on stage, and I wasn't thinking so much in terms of like the structure of film editing and doing it in that way, all of a sudden it opened it up for um, again these different iterations where it's like I'd have James one and Marilyn one, who would then be displaced by James two, Marilyn two, and then James three, Marilyn three. And I could play a little bit with ages, like they could be different ages. I could play with gender if I wanted. Uh, there was something about it that just felt more theatrical to have this dance going on between the characters who would never interact. So it was almost that they were in this coexisting alternative realities. A little bit like what was that film that came out some years ago that was really great? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Did you see
Yeah,
that film?
yeah. Mhm.
And when that came out, I was like, oh man, this is sort of how I think about life to begin with. And it was great to see that made into such that concept explored in such a fun and dynamic way. Anyway, so this would be, I don't know if it was a challenge. It was actually really fun because what I felt like I was doing, I felt like a DJ that was getting to remix something. And I was like, I'm just going to go. And it kind of doubled in length. And then it added things to it that just weren't there. And I hope to, yeah, maybe this year I'll stage it. I mean, I'm lucky because of my theater background and what I do here where I live. I know a lot of different actors and there's accessibility to make it happen. It's just a matter of juggling it with my other projects and, putting in the time and the focus. But I do feel like it needs to live off the page, which it still hasn't. I'm surprised it hasn't, but not yet. Not
Yeah.
yet.
One day, I
One
believe in
day.
it. I think it'll be great. Yeah,
Thank
I have two questions. I want to ask one question that's more writing based before I forget it, just because
you.
I have a bad habit of thinking of a million questions while people talk and then forgetting all of them. But just saying out loud, I have two questions, so I know to come back to the other one. But one thing I really find interesting about this script is the way you kind of balance ambiguity and detail. And it's something that was really apparent to me when you were reading just now, the one line, let's call the man James and the woman Marilyn, as if their names don't really matter. They could be anyone, they could be any person. That, in contrast to the really, really finite details of the setting, of their actions, the balance there is really interesting to me, and it creates this kind of like narrative tension, I think. And I'm curious about your thought process if with that. Was it intentional? Do you feel like it's just the nature of this story itself? Kind of what was your thought process there?
That's a cool observation. And yeah, it's funny because my partner will sometimes tell me, I've told her that I'm not a very visual person, in that when I'm remembering or recalling things, I'm not very visual, or I think that I'm not. And she may have gotten a haircut and I completely don't see. And she's like, you don't even notice, do you? Anything new? But it could be anything. It's like I'm kind of in my own world. She goes, you just notice the things that you tend to notice, whatever that may be. And and the reason I bring that up is because with the detail thing, she said, but I don't understand. She goes, I'll be reading your writing and there'll be such specific and strong visual details in it. And it can be hyper visual at times. And I was like, yeah, I guess it makes me think of this whole thing like we curate our own reality. Is like, I curate in my own way. Um, but that balance, I think it's something in my other writings as a novelist, as a screenwriter. There is, I won't say it's by design, but there is a drive to harmonize or find a balance between exactly what you just said, details and ambiguity, or like vagaries, ambiguities. And you're sort of like, it could be this, like, that whole thing that you brought up. Oh, let's call him James. Let's call her Marilyn. This idea of characters in books, you are not necessarily, or when I'm writing them, a defined and definite character. You are just this. But people as characters are morphing and changing, and very easily you could call them something else. They could be different ages. Like it's open, there's wiggle room there. There's sort of wiggle room for other things to be happening. And yet at the same time, very concrete details, like what was so obvious isn't the right word. It was so clear and vivid to me as one of the strongest things. I saw and knew that it had to be a yellow children's room. Why that is, I don't know. Somebody told me they had their theory as to why it was, which was interesting to hear. But it was like, okay, I saw that. So certain things I knew, like the yellow children's room. And of course, all these different toys are coming from different eras. So they're specific, like the Cabbage Patch Kid. And I do remember learning that when I was young. I didn't have one, my sister did. And I remember reading about this whole thing that it had to have, they were so popular back in the 80s, and everybody, it was expensive. And yeah, for those younger viewers may not know, I think you might know what Cabbage Patch Kids are, at least. I think they're collectible. But anyway, yeah, it had to have Xavier on the butt, because if it didn't, that could be one of the knockoffs that they were selling, the bootleg Cabbage Patch Kids. But like little details like that I remember that sort of just float to the surface. Yeah, so again, I don't know if that exactly, I'm good at answering questions in a roundabout way.
That's okay. I'm good at asking questions in a roundabout way, so it's a
All right,
perfect
then
fit.
perfect. It's a great match.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And it's funny to hear you say that you don't think of yourself as a visual person in that way, because I would say the same about me. Um, Even when I'm writing, I have a habit of like commissioning artwork of characters that I write, and the first artist, I have one artist I work with all the time, and they're always like, "Okay, what do they look like?" I'm like, "I don't know, a person."
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
like something. Um, which is interesting, especially for people, both of us, who write scripts and work in visual media. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy how that plays
Let
out.
me ask you a question then, because this is something someone asked me and I found it interesting. And it's a simple one, but maybe you've thought about it. When you're reading, someone had asked me, when I'm reading a book, am I seeing everything? And I'm like, no. I said, I'm reading the words, I'm seeing the words, I'm feeling something. It's a felt sense, but I'm not visualizing every single thing. Do you visualize what you read in a
Not
novel, you say?
Yeah, no, not often. Like I can say that if I'm reading, I have a vague idea of what things look like if I sit down and think about it, but it's not playing like a film inside my head. Like I don't see it that way. I don't when I'm reading or writing, neither one.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, similar, but it's funny that the writing can turn out to be visual for others.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that in general, having those really concrete details, even if we're not visualizing them, so to speak, can help make the writing feel grounded. Like I do think that's one of the ways, rather than
Yes.
leading it up to the reader, just like grounding them like that.
And it feels grounding for me. I always need to have a handful of those foundational pieces that are sort of, I call them portals or refrains. Like there are certain ones I need to have. And I feel like, okay, that's my stability.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then from there, I can go crazy.
Nice. I
And
love
it,
that. I love that way of thinking about that. That's really interesting. Um, Now, I am curious. I really want to ask you about all of your different writing experience because you work in so many different forms in your work, but I don't quite know what the best question to start with that is. So I might start by asking which one you started with. What was the very first type of writing you got into?
stories when I was very, very young. I've been writing since I was a child. And what I used to do, I was a big comic book fan and collector and used to read adventure books and choose your own adventures and all that stuff. And I used to love at the end of the comics, like they would tell you what's coming next issue, like this little preview as if they were talking, to all the readers. So I would write, I remember my two characters being very young, and I had a detective named Jack Booker, and I had a superhero named the Red Falcon. And I'd write these stories, and at the end, I would have stay tuned. Will this happen to the Red Falcon? And in my mind, I felt like I had thousands of readers, millions of readers that were so interested in what was coming next. It was all this imaginary audience. And then the audience changed to in grade school, I started writing stories, casting my classmates in the stories. So I always had to be the hero.
Of course.
I was the protagonist with, I could have one or two friends that would also be with me. And then there would be adventures. And sometimes I would cast, there would be a little romance. We were in fifth grade. And it's like, and then it would get passed around class to see, oh, who did he cast me as? What romance was happening? And it was sort of, I had like a real little audience, like whoever in class was reading, the six or seven people that were, but definitely started just story writing and not thinking in terms of like, films or plays and all that stuff came much later. And I always thought I thought I would write for comics. And then I realized, or I thought, oh, but I can't draw at all. And it's like, I guess I can just be the writer. But no, I feel like I want to be the writer and the artist. And I just do not have any drawing skill. So it kind of like just shifted away from that.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I definitely understand that. It is kind of a shame. I feel like there's not so much of a market is a weird word, but I'm going to use it. A market for people who are just writers in comic book spheres anymore. I feel like places are more so looking for artists, authors join. But maybe that's me being biased in my exposure. I also was the type of person who wanted to write. I wanted to write graphic novels. I was a huge manga and
Mm.
anime fan as a kid. So I completely understand that there. Do you think, though, that your interest in comic book writing eventually kind of influenced you as you're moving into scripts and screenplays?
Definitely, just in terms of like structure and framework. And the play started first, like when I moved in my late 20s to Taos, New Mexico, which is where I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I've lived in New Mexico for 20, almost 25 years. Um, I did not have any experience with theater. That was not something I was really going to be into. But then a friend of mine was running a gallery and she said, have you ever thought about writing a play? And I was like, oh, not really. I said, but she said, if you want to do one, we can stage it here. I was like, okay, this is a fun challenge. I'll see what I can do. I wrote the play. It was so much fun. Um, and then I got hooked into wanting to write and direct plays. And I just spent the next year and a half only focused on playwriting and reading tons and tons of plays. And somehow this evolved into, I wound up, I mean, fast forward to now is that I was starting to teach theater to young people. And now I run a theater company I've been for a while now for young people, grade school, middle school, high school. So all that was sort of a left turn I didn't see coming, but maybe it was building all along and I just didn't know
Hmm. Hmm.
the theater part.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so much fun. Those programs, like teaching classes to kids that young, can be like really, really wonderful. I was in a class when I was young, in that kind of theater class, and then helped mentor for another class once. Um, and so that's really great that you're doing that work. That's so much fun, and then introducing kids to the arts like that.
I've
Um,
developed so many bonds with, and I've watched a lot of these kids in town like grow up because I've known some since kindergarten and now they're, young adult men and women and or just out and about in town. And others are coming through the ranks. So, just watching those cycles of creativity has been really cool.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's amazing. Do you feel like kind of having that production background kind of changed the way you write scripts at all?
Definitely. Like right now, I'm just before we got on this call, I'm starting to work on a new play for my youth ensemble. So far the last 4 years, it's been an original play that I would write, and it's a 6 month program, and then we staged that play. So I was just starting to work on that one, the very beginning, and with those specifically, because I know I'm going to be directing them and staging it here, there's the consideration of all the logistics. It's not just like with my novels, what I love is the range of mobility where I can go anywhere. It's like I'm not thinking in terms of this is going to be presented on a stage, or I'm not thinking of the physicality, but I do. So it's like with all these different things, if I'm writing a stage play, I am thinking in terms of staging and bodies in space. You're moving around and all of that. So movement. So that has a much more physical quality. While in the novel writing, it's like I won't call one a restriction because the other one it's different. So, but that I do love that in the novel writing that it's like the mobility is expanded in a different way. And of course, the screenplay that came later and that was different too, because then I'm thinking in terms of this might be filmed. And that was a different way of writing from, I think the theater writing inspired or informed it a lot, but there are differences that I've been finding in while writing screenplays. I kind of spent some time where I gave myself time. Okay, I have to write a certain number of screenplays. I'm like that kind of like obsessive type where it's like if I find something, I have to do a lot of it for a while to like feel comfortable or get into it. So that became my thing for a little bit. I have to write a certain number of screenplays, like short ones, and Ballad of the Cuckoos was in that batch.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I completely understand that. I'm obsessive about writing in general, so I will never judge someone for being
No, that's
like
great. I love to hear
one-track
that people are
minded.
still obsessive about writing. It makes me
Yeah.
happy in this day and age to hear that.
Yes, no, absolutely. Same, same. Um, Now I'm curious, when you're coming up with ideas, do you start with form first, or do you have like the idea first for a tale of some kind, and then decide later down the road what form it's going to be?
It varies. Sometimes I approach it from different forms, meaning, okay, so one is that a lot of my novels have become more hybrid, so they actually will include and incorporate screenplay or stage play. So that hybridization has become more common in the way I write. Also, like with the Ballad of the Cuckoos, it being a stage play, I might want to try it in one form, but I won't. I can be restless and it won't necessarily stay just in that form. Earlier, I had mentioned Nocturne Variations. That one has been I had it as a story, it became a screenplay, a stage play. Like, I like to see how it will fit just because it will be different, with the approaches. So I would say that I experiment and move around. And sometimes, again, what I love about novels is I feel like the way at least I write them now, um, I could incorporate all of it. Like it could all fit under that umbrella if I choose to, go in that direction or I move to go in that direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now you're balancing all of these forms. You're writing scripts, you're writing screenplays, you're writing novels. How do you, I'm asking this selfishly as someone who has not figured it out, how do you balance the projects and kind of do you work at them all at once? Do you start, finish, start, finish? How do you go about it?
Um, I mean, so I have my schedule that I stick to and I follow. I'm pretty consistent and disciplined about my schedule. And within that schedule, if I'm working, like right now, I'm working on the new play, I will predominantly work just on that until it's done. I've given myself my sort of deadline. But if I need a little break where it's like, oh, I'm going to take a 1 week or several days, I got to step away from it, I may dabble in something else, but not something quite as big. I try not to have like major projects happening simultaneously. I mean, novels for me take the longest to write. So there'll be other things where taking the breaks, maybe going into something else, or it depends if they're projects that is it an audio recording thing? Like it's a whole different form. So I can do that, or am I going to be doing a reading out somewhere? But for the actual sitting down and writing, yeah, I try to stay singular in my focus for the most part, just because the way I think of it is like all these different works have like energy fields.
Yeah.
And so whatever that energy field is, I want to stay true to that one and sort of, you know, see it through because for me, there's only a shelf life to that. And then it's like that time has passed, like a relationship. It's like, oh, I don't have a feeling for that relationship anymore. It's like it was part of who I was then.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so I mostly stick to one thing at a time with, little dabblings, but not, I also don't like to get they thought I was like, oh, you must be up burning the candles on both ends to get this. And I'm like, that's not me at all. It's like I just do a little each day, but consistent, but it's like smaller amounts.
Mhm.
And I'm fairly, like I said, regimented in my schedule.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. That makes sense. That makes sense. And it's interesting because I do feel like I mean, there's a lot of online writing advice in general out there.
mhm.
But so many people they talk about, oh, write this many words a day or hit this goal, sprints, et cetera, et cetera. I know I always have mixed feelings about that. I'm curious your opinion on those kind of like arbitrary writing goals that are out there.
Yeah, I think to each their own. Some of those back in the day were helpful for me. There are the simplest ones have always stayed with me. There was one that I saw, if you want to be a writer, write. And I was always like, I love that
Yeah.
because that you want to talk about vague yet specific too. It's and then there was one by um how did it go now? I can't remember. It was a Charles Baudelaire quote that I often referred back to. Again, it's usually the really simple ones that, instead of like overthinking it and then finding what works for you. What works for me is not what's going to work for somebody else. So I'm definitely careful about advice.
Mhm.
It's like all I can do is share what I do,
Yeah.
how I've done. And it's like, same as like, I don't know, you might be someone or someone else that stays up until 5 in the morning. They like to write at night. That's not who I am. Um, I've found my rhythm, but only, after having done this for a long time, it's like, okay, this works for me. I mean, the one thing, which is not really advice, but the one thing that's always been um, being, as long as I'm consistent, like
Mhm.
I'm consistently doing it. To me, if I'm not, um, I tell myself, I've been telling myself, you can't write tomorrow. You can write today. When
Mhm.
tomorrow comes, then it will be today, and then maybe you'll write or you won't. It's like, so either I do it or I don't. And the rest is like all the stories I'll tell myself about why I didn't do it or all of this. So I
Mhm.
try to avoid those traps. And if I don't do it, then I just try to let it go and not, oh man, beating myself up over it. It's like, that's it. Didn't happen,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I love that thought process, especially because if it didn't happen yesterday, it can still happen today. It can just continue on.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would love to change gears a tiny bit because I do know you just had a novel come out. We're talking about your novels,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you had one come out recently. I would love to talk more about that if you could tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. It's titled No One Dreams in Color. And actually, film is a very huge part of it. Um, this was published by Unsolicited Press, is a press out of Portland. They've published several of my other novels. And yeah, without going all too deep into it, it's sort of like existential or psychic noir
Yeah.
in that as a young man from New York, and he's having when his mother committed suicide when he was younger, he went through this dark period, and there was this 9-minute film called Wendigo, a very experimental film that was exactly what he needed to see. And it kind of starts where he's reflecting upon that film and time in his life because the filmmaker who had moved to a town in New Mexico, they found out has disappeared. He only made this one film and he disappeared. Anyway, this young man goes from New York on this sort of goes down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and he's driven to go there. And he does, and meets different characters. There's different things going on. There's a young girl who's 13 and is or believes she is being haunted by werewolves again or is becoming one. She's not sure. She goes through this like dark period in her life and she takes solace in listening to the Beastie Boys. That's like
Love
her
that.
thing. And anyway, it's about the relationships that form between him, this young girl, her mom, who was the partner of the man who disappeared. And this is one of those books where it's like I originally wrote a screenplay, a story Wendigo, which became a screenplay, which both of those things are in the book and became connected to this character who is the one that disappeared. So it was like this novel that was able to subsume or sort of like ingest the screenplay, the story, and so that was fun to be able to start with that. And it's like, oh, this screenplay that it's not been made into anything has a life of its own that's now going to give birth to a novel and an entire story behind it with this filmmaker. Um, yeah, so that one just came out a couple of months ago. And yeah, I guess that's it about that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love this idea of all these pieces kind of being interconnected, and you could even potentially in the future do something with the short story or screenplay, and then people can be like, "Oh, Easter eggs! We saw that. We found
Yeah,
that. That would be
yeah.
so cool."
Well, it's tough because I realized, I don't know how you feel about this, but as you keep working and your work grows, and if it grows in different directions, I'm like, the reality is a lot of this stuff won't see the light of day. They may not get turned into film. So it's like, okay, how can I give it some kind of life then? What can I do with it so it's not just sitting in the shadows?
Mhm.
And so sometimes, I feel like in that way, novels, the form of a novel for me, can be very welcoming and accommodating. Like, oh, bring all your stuff to me. I'll take it all. The novel's like, I'll take your screenplay. I'll take that. So it feels like a very generous host. And that's why my novels have probably changed over the last, 10 years. I think because as my work has gone in different directions, the novels have gone in different directions
Mhm. Mhm.
as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that way of thinking of it too, because we definitely, I feel like all writers have things that they've written and they care about or they really like, but it's like that's not going to go anywhere at this point just on its own. So what can we do with it? And that's a really interesting way of looking at it because I feel like a lot of people would kind of jump to the conclusion of, oh, I'll put this on a blog or I'll just put this online or it'll just sit on my desktop. But giving it new life in that way is a really unique way of handling it. That's really cool.
Well, it helps me also because it would be depressing or dejecting if like so it's like okay, what can I do that's proactive,
Hmm.
and not sit with all this because in general, being a writer, there's lots of uh, whatever those challenges that come dealing with yourself and with the rejections and the frustrations that any writers go through in general. So
Hmm.
it's like trying to just figure out ways to be creative with all of that,
Hmm.
and not feel like a victim,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's something that I, and this is just me personally, I really enjoy about independent film. This is a weird connection, but with indie film and like short film, there's almost, depending on what you're writing, there's almost always an avenue of, oh, if I want this to go somewhere, I can make it. Like I can put together a team and we can make this film just on our own. We can put it together. And
Yeah.
it kind of I don't want to say it skips over the rejection part because then you have to get people to watch it, but it's a little more straightforward than I wrote a short story. What do I do with it there?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, people, especially in this day and age with the accessibility with technology and like equipment and stuff,
Mhm.
like if you know some people, like, hey, I have this and you have this, and okay, let's get together and just, you can do it. You really can do it.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Now I'm curious, how do you personally kind of manage rejection when it does come to submissions and kind of, as you said, writers, we all deal with rejections all of the time. How do you handle those feelings in that process?
At this point, I'm mostly numb to it. It doesn't mean like I'll have if I'm going through like a tough time in my life or having an emotional week and it comes, that could affect me more.
Yeah.
But even if it affects me, or it never usually lasts very long.
Mhm.
I try not to invest much energy into it
Mhm.
just because I've submitted to so many places in so many different ways that, the amount of rejections that
Mhm.
I've gotten, and 80 to 90% of it is that, it's a
Mhm.
much smaller percent that wasn't. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I guess there's just a familiarity
Mhm.
and not even in a negative way saying numb to it, just sort of like maybe a thickening of the skin that
Mhm.
happens over time. I don't think there's any way that if I was so agonizing each time, it would make this whole thing so thoroughly unpleasant. And
Mhm.
I really just don't want it to be that. I mean, it's hard enough. So it's like, okay, you just try to find your joys where you can,
Mhm.
and how about you?
Mhm.
How are you? I'm curious. I'm turning the tables on the interviewer.
Yeah, yeah, no, I feel like I'm kind of the same where I am so used to it at this point, and it's kind of funny because I keep a spreadsheet with all of my submissions and all of my rejections and acceptances. And sometimes I look at that and I'm like, it's a little daunting because it is majority rejection. Sometimes it's self-torture there. But
Yeah.
it's not it is also equally motivating though to see the sections that are acceptances and see kind of like the process of, oh, we have to go through all of these things, but you're just looking for the right place. I always think of it in terms of it's just the process of looking for the right place, not really a comment on the
Mhm.
quality of the story. Though I've written some terrible things in the past. Like I'm not saying everything I've
Yeah,
written is great. I've
yeah.
written some really bad stories before. Um,
We all have that's part of the process too.
yes, absolutely. So some things I've submitted and got rejected, and I'm like, yeah, no, that was me. But Other times it's looking at it and saying, okay, well, this wasn't the right place at the right time. And I will say, I think that being on the kind of other side of it, being like an editor and being the person to decide accept or reject has kind of changed my perspective with that a little bit
Mhm.
because we read a lot of really great stories, and sometimes we reject them because we have like a cap on how many stories we'll accept, and there are two that are just too similar, and it's like we can only pick one, and they're both just as good. Other times we'll go through and like I will really love a story, but like the other editors won't because it's not to their genre preference. And so like I get outvoted and then I feel terrible writing that email. I'm like, I really, really loved this, but everybody else just didn't vibe with it. I'm sorry. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I actually just finished sending all of our decision emails for issue 10 last week, and I think I hate writing rejections far more than I hate receiving them. And if that makes anybody feel any better, I feel terrible about it the whole time.
I mean, we had a magazine here in Taos going 15, 20 years ago. And so, again, we were on that side of it. And because this is, a smaller town and local, it's like, so you're seeing everybody at the coffee shop.
Mhm.
So it was
Oh,
sort
that's
of,
worse.
all the rejections you really couldn't like hide from. But a lot of it was exactly as you said, both things. One was that sometimes there were stories you're thinking of the overarching vision, and it's like, oh, these two are too similar for this issue. Or we would have, it was a democracy that mostly functioned. And yeah, people didn't agree.
Mhm.
But what's cool sometimes is like I found, in fact, this was a place based out of Philadelphia. I had submitted a novel of mine, The Last Furies, and it was so interesting because they have people that have this functioning mini democracy and they were making their choice. And they send me the people's, this is what people, had to say about it. And it was real, what I found so fascinating and actually enjoyed it. It was so the polarization of those who were like, oh my God, this is amazing and brilliant. So it's like, I can't stand and but each side they kind of went into it, and I was like, wow, this is interesting because they're giving thought and time to it. So I appreciated it. But
Mhm.
the funny thing what happened is that it didn't get published by that publisher, and it did get published by another publisher about 4 or 5 months later. And I asked that magazine, I'm like, hey, you had one guy who wrote this really, he was into the novel and like how he responded to it and his analysis. I said it was really amazing. And you think there's any way, I don't know if you would give me his name, I said, but I would like to see if I could use part of this for, and anyway, he wound up writing an extended review. We kind of became friendlier friends. And so I don't know, all these things, you just never know where it's going to turn out. I mean, they could have easily just said, sorry, we can't give you his name or her name. I didn't know if it was him or her at the time.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, all of these things, it's like the twist that they take, you just don't know.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I love that. That's an amazing like twist of connections. That's so cool. That's so cool how that worked out. Mhm.
I mean, they're great too. All of these, like we're talking about, as you're seeing, these are all indie presses, and it's
Mhm.
like it's not the competitive, we're trying to like devour each other kind of things. Like, hey, we're all just small presses that are just doing our thing, trying to subsist
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
best we can. And yeah, so I always just appreciate whether someone likes what I've done or not. It's like, oh wow, there was a depth of thoughtfulness that went into
Mhm.
really why they're not into this or why they were.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was like,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Absolutely. And getting that feedback is really, really valuable anytime I submit somewhere and they give me an explanation as to why they didn't like it or what they did like about it. I'm always like, I love it so much because everything in the publishing industry is just kind of a dedication of time. And the fact that someone took the time to do that
I
is really
know.
wonderful.
And we know that generally, I'm sure you've had the same experience, you're going to either get the form rejection or the
Mhm.
one line form. That's going to be most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
feel like few and far between to get the in-depth.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. No, 100%. Um, kind of in the vein of indie presses, indie publishers, magazines, when you're looking for a place to submit your work and to publish your work, do you have kind of, how can I phrase this? Like a process you go through when you're vetting a place, when you're looking for a publisher, where you're kind of searching through, or do you kind of just send everything everywhere? I've been guilty of that, so I will not judge anyone who's done that. But what's your
I
approach to
used
that?
to send everything. I used to cast a much wider net.
Mm,
I'm a bit more discriminating now, especially if I know the more recent novels, the more experimental. I definitely try to do research and see who might be publishing things that are a little bit more offbeat,
mhm,
or and I have my lists, and I'll go through, and then I'll just check the website, see some books they've published, read their synopsis or whatever they, talk about what they do publish. There are certain ones, and honestly, it's funny how they say, "Oh, don't judge a book by its cover." You could absolutely judge certain books by their covers, because I'll see covers and I'm like, "This is not my kind of publisher." Okay, and whether it's like, I don't know, romance paperback, just the cover sometimes will tell me, and
mhm,
I'll read. Um, so yeah, I definitely, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm like uber discriminating or like I'm going so deep into it, but I make my lists. I start with, and then I have my publishers that were always sort of my top indie publishers that I always submit to them first, or have tried to crack in with them. Um, and then, yeah, just doing the research and checking on the updates, because I've noticed a lot of these small indie press lists do get updated. You'll see new publishers you've never heard of. It's just amazing how many publishers there are.
mhm,
It seems endless. Like you can't possibly. I always think, wow, how did I never hear of this press? And there are just so many, which is cool. It's like, okay, so people are still wanting to do this and put books out,
mhm,
which is great, for so many reasons.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm asking this selfishly so I can go back
Mhm.
and write these down. But
Okay.
could you shout out your top indie presses that you always submit to?
Oh yeah, my top. Okay, well, my top was Zonk. Do you know Zonk
I
Publishing?
don't actually. That's not one I've heard of, no.
Dzanc, and they've been doing it. I don't know how long, but for a while, quite reputable. They've developed quite a catalog. I almost got in once. Was so I thought I was on the cusp. It didn't work out, and which was fine. But I'll generally try to send to them. $2 Radio was one that I've tried to break into. It's another press that's been kind of rogue and maverick, doing their own thing for a while now. I mean, it's one that have built up credibility over time because they've been doing it for a while. One that I think at this point is impossible for, at least for me, and I don't know, to get into, is New Directions, which is sort of, they've been around since the 1930s. I mean, and they've published like Henry Miller, Clarice Lispector, a bunch of other people. Um, but every once in a while, they had a contest once, which I'm sure everybody around the world submitted to. Um, yeah, those were like top three. I mean, probably there are a couple of others, but those are the ones that come to mind. I think I have about two or three others. Like there's not as much, but maybe Milkweed was one that I used to submit to a lot.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, and then I just try to find sometimes writers from the past that I like. Like there was a very small press out of, oh, was it Santa Monica, somewhere in California, Santa Barbara. It was called Capra Press, and they published some of Henry Miller's later stuff. It's like, wow, I wonder if this is still around. And it really wasn't. They were kind of explaining what was going on with their press, and like maybe a family member had taken it over, and sounded like it was defunct. But sometimes, because I would read a lot of older writers, and I would see what are the presses that were around then, the indie presses. And there are some that are still going that haven't necessarily been swallowed by, the giant whales out there that are swallowing, you know. And so, yeah, those are the ones that come to mind first.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. I will take note of that when I go back and edit this interview. I'll be like scribbling down notes
Yeah.
because I keep a list too, and I've heard of some of those, but not all of them. So thank you
Well,
for adding
Zonk
to
is
my list.
great. Yeah, Zonk and I can't remember Michelle Potter. Michelle something is the editor, and she's been doing it for a while. Yeah, there's some. I found. I wish I could remember them all, but I found some cool stuff out there. Like a guy who's doing what was the name of the writer? It was based on. There's a writer whose name I'm forgetting, but they said it's a contest that he does every year for more experimental literature.
Mm,
And it's
cool.
one of the few where it's like, he's just trying to look for things that are very offbeat, things that would very much not be published by a mainstream publisher,
Mhm,
and trying to give a home for that.
mhm.
I'm looking for like, what's that thing like Home for Wayward Orphans? That's why like there are those of us out there, we need the Home for Wayward Orphans in our
Mhm.
writing.
Hmm. No, absolutely. And I know you mentioned kind of working in experimental forms a few times. How do you specifically define experimental writing? I know it's hard to define experimental
No, it's
writing,
so
but
hard. It almost reminds me of like, so when I was younger, um, and I don't know your age, but anyway, when I was younger in the 90s and it was like the grunge movement was happening.
I
And
love grunge. Yeah.
okay, so I remember it was called like alternative music.
Mhm.
And now, because like, I don't even know if you still use the term, but it's like, oh, alternative to what?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, but that was the thing, like the Pearl Jam, Nirvana, the whole sub pop's like, oh, this is alternative music. And it was sort of that. I don't know if it's more of a feeling. I just feel like maybe it's writing that is playing with form and the structure of the way you're going about it. I would say it's not traditional, but then again, these days, what is traditional? But there is still a lot of linearity in novels,
Mhm.
or it might be going. But I do think part of it is like, the way that it's rendered or presented might be part of that experimentation, or um, yeah, I don't know, the rendering, the distillation of how it's done. But yeah, it is really hard to define. I do not have a ready-made definition of
Mhm.
that at all. I just know that, and then there might be someone out there who's so experimental. They're like, your work is mainstream compared to mine, so it seems very relative, all of this,
Mhm. Mhm.
But I know the work has been called experimental, and I
Mhm.
think of it as some of it in that way too. So,
No, that makes sense. I feel kind of similarly with the genre term speculative fiction because people
oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I my writing tends to fall under speculative fiction because I'm like it's not 100% realistic contemporary, but it's not this fantasy world of magic systems and it's not there's not robots running around. So I'm like it is what it is. I just throw on speculative. I don't know if I know what it means either, but we're running
I
with
think
it.
that's the one I use the most for all my writing. If you would say,
Mhm.
I would say I'm a speculative fiction writer, but if you would look up the definition, I probably don't fall into, because to me, speculative is sort of this quality of like, what if,
Mhm.
whatever that takes, whatever form, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, speculative, that is such a strange one, because if we go to a bookstore, I think they still have bookstores. If we go to a bookstore and under speculative fiction, you might find specific things, and we may think, hey, why isn't this in speculative fiction? Or couldn't this be there?
Mhm.
I mean, all of this it's like so funny, like realistic fiction. Like, what is that supposed to mean?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I'm like everything asks kind of that what if question. It's just some do it in a more offbeat way than others, and that's kind of how they get thrown into there, I guess. I don't know. I run with it. I'm like other people can define it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, I'm
Mhm,
with you. But I love the term speculative. I just feel like for me it's one that has a wide umbrella to it. That's how I see it.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I do want to know, is there anything that you're currently working on that you want to kind of like tease for our listeners or tell them to watch out for?
Sure. Well, the one thing that will be coming out soon, and this was really fun and different, is I've done a lot of used to do it more back in New York and some here, spoken word performances. And I played with a bassist, stand-up bassist, Ben Wright. And we would do some live performances. And about 12 years ago, we recorded a lot of our material, hoping to make it into an album. And that was it. We left it there. We just had the recordings. Fast forward to my other publisher. This is a publisher out of Canada, Lost Telegram Press, who published a different book of mine. I had shared the work with him. We were talking about he found a company, a way to put something out on vinyl.
Oh,
And,
cool.
he really wanted to do that. And we were going to do live recordings, but, I was like, wow, these are really uneven. A lot of them are just recorded with phones. And I was like, I do have this material from years ago. I said, if you want to hear it, he absolutely loved it. And like, so it moved really quickly where soon we're in the final stages. The cover's been designed and that will be released on vinyl, which will be a spoken word and music, um, yeah, album that will be released. And it'll be the press's first album that they've released. And
Cool.
so that will be available. We'll probably wind up doing a live performance or a show sometime down the road. But yeah, that will be coming out next from that publisher.
Mhm.
And so, my daughter, who's 23 and is like a huge vinyl collector, like she's excited. Like I know a lot of not just older people, younger people that are still into vinyl and
Mhm.
collect vinyl. And so, we're not expecting, oh, we're going to make a killing from this. It's just like, okay, this will be just really fun to have it preserved in that form.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's titled Morphic Trespass. And it will, I don't know if it will be out in other audio forms. We just know that it will be on an album. So
Mhm. That's amazing. That's such a unique kind of way of doing that, especially through a press rather than kind of like a music producer, I guess. Like the form
I
that
love that kind of
that's
stuff
so
where things
cool.
are like people are doing things that are not there.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think that's fun. It's sort of so you're not pigeonholed. It's like, okay, he's a press, but he's been doing he's a newer press and he's doing interesting stuff. And I will give a shout out to Lost Telegram because the book that he made of mine, the last series, and the books he's putting out, they're all handmade. He does the printing, the binding. I mean, they're really works of art, like
Hmm.
handmade, hand designed. He's like, this one man operation, and a lot goes into it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it's, again, in this day and age, like, doing something like that, yeah, it takes a lot of conviction and vision.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely. That's amazing. That's so, so cool. I'm definitely gonna have to like keep tabs on you somehow to find out when that's
yeah,
out. That's
just
so cool.
follow me on IG or go to Lost Telegram Press, check out his website. You'll see some of the things he's doing.
Mhm. Perfect. Amazing. Amazing. I guess I will jump back into my last two questions. Um,
Okay.
of the interview. One is very straightforward. You've kind of already mentioned it. But if our listeners wanted to find you and your work, where can they do that?
So my name is John Biscello, and there's johnbiscello.com, which is my blog, but it also functions as my website. And then the same, if you just type up my name, Instagram has also as a way to contact me. So I would say those are probably the two easiest ways to follow or get in touch, which would have all my other information with that.
Perfect, perfect.
Mhm.
And I can also link the website and your Instagram to the description of the podcast so they can
Okay.
click it there. Um, but yeah, last question. I ask everyone this question. Um, if you could give a piece of writing advice to someone or just advice to someone entering the industry in general, what would you tell them?
Mhm. Probably, let's see here. I have to be careful with advice, though. Let's
You
see
said
here.
that earlier, so I was like,
Yes,
okay.
yes. Um, well, actually, I remember talking to a young group once, and I would probably echo similar to what I said earlier. But if this is something that you really feel like committed to, like that you have to do it, like something is compelling you inside to like be creative in this way, find a ritual slash routine that you're going to follow and do that consistently. Like whatever that is for you, whatever is going to work, but like put in the time consistently. It does add up. It really does. It can take time, but it's like none of it is wasted. You learn, you grow as a writer, material accumulates. But it does. And I'll give a quote here from a big sports fan. And so I'm a huge New York Knicks fan. We just won the championship this year, in case I don't know if you know about basketball, but anyway, the Knicks won the championship, and Jalen Brunson is their point guard, and they were talking about some of the comeback games they had, and he just had this thing that I think echoes what I just said. Habit translates. And that was it. He just said, even when things were tough and we were down by this many points, continue with your process. Habit translates. And I do feel like, and I loved hearing it. And it's something that I try and abide by, like, keep doing something and, you just don't know what will happen.
Mhm. I love that. That's amazing advice. I know nothing about basketball, but that is great advice regardless.
Okay. So maybe you were a Philadelphia 76ers fan. I don't know.
No, no. The closest I'll get to sports is the Flyers or Phillies. And only the
Okay.
Phillies because I have a friend who writes baseball fiction, and so she has converted me.
Ah,
Um, but yeah,
all right.
that is amazing advice regardless. So thank you for that, and thank you so much again for being here with me on this interview.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. Really was a pleasure. I've enjoyed this time.